Stanley Liu. I'm part of the 200 class, and for the topic of my video will be covering recursion, something that we have been recently working on. So recursion is used to solve problems, which is kind of obvious, but the way recursion works is that it will, like this right here, you have a function and then you enter the parameters, and the most basic recursive function will be the function itself, and then it will return a few values, and then returning these values will continually loop the function in a recursive order, hence the name recursion. One thing about recursion is that when using recursion, if you want to use this method, you have to find a pattern within the smaller test cases. Like for here, the pattern that we have is that we are going to return the function lines, but for simplicity, it's called f of n. So if f of n has two inputs, those two inputs will be f of n minus 1 and m plus n. So in this recursive function, if we have f of n of 5 and 4, we will loop it so that it returns f of n minus 1, and since n is 5 in this example, return 4 and 4 plus 5 outside. And this will continually loop for over and over again until it reaches a value where it cannot continue the loop further. Sometimes when using a recursive function, you will need more parameters. Like in this case, if n is equal to m, we need to return 2 times n and not continue the function. Recursion has, as useful and short as it may be, it still has its downsides, as calling a function itself too many times will often cause it to have higher response rate, or meaning that if I use recursion for a problem and then I use iteration for the same problem, it is more likely that iteration will be faster than recursion because it does not have to call itself over and over again. Now recursion is generally useful for smaller test cases, while iteration is generally used for problems that have larger test cases where like n is equal to like 50, whereas because recursion is generally less efficient, and if you want to use recursion for larger problems, there are a few things that you have to use, and such methods can include keeping the inputs before, so like keeping the return values so that you don't have to recall over and over again, and this will save a large amount of time. As you can see here, we have this recursion function. The output can be quite large as we're using long, and our function is ways, and it inputs in an integer. As you can see, our function returns n minus 1, and we have a mini sort of function here. Method n minus 1 equals ways n minus 1 plus ways n minus 2, and this will shorten the stack of the amount of things that we can that are needed to be recalled. So overall, recursion is something that you should use for smaller problems, but it is very simple to use, as the most you probably need to do is find a pattern and write the code for that pattern, and Um, just remember that it is less efficient and it is better to use iteration for larger problems.